secrets. It swallowed them whole and hummed like nothing happened. She sat on the hood of the green convertible, boots crossed at the ankles, watching fog lift off a mirror of black water. The car was old muscle made new on a patchwork budget, scratched paint, new heart. She had a jacket 2 sizes too tough for the morning heat, and a bright smear of lime green on her mouth that made her look like she meant trouble. Her hair, brown and feral, flashed a white streak like lightning when the sun snagged it. "Clock says we're late," Remy said, flipping a card between those long fingers like he was shuffling fate. The edge of it glowed violet, then dulled, like it remembered something and let it go. Rogue slid off the hood and tugged her sleeves to cover the skin at her wrists. "We're right on time." He had the kind of eyes you didn't see twice because the first time rewrote the rules, black as deep water with pupils lit red. Everything else about him, purple sleeveless shirt, ripped jeans, boots scuffed honest, looked like a dare he'd chosen instead of a life he'd been handed. "2 towns over," he said, nodding down the road. "Credit union. Lunch crowd means fewer eyes, board guard. Vault's got an old keypad, easy like Sunday." She tasted gasoline and something sour that wasn't the swamp. It was the stink of their last front door, the one locked from the outside. The man who called kids strays out of one side of his mouth and family out the other. The memory came with a bruise she wore in places no one could see. "Easy," she echoed and palmed the side mirror, face blinking back at her through a smear of mud. "We don't hurt anybody." Remy's smile tilted like a coin in flight. "You got my oath, cheer." He tossed the card. It clicked into a sleeve holster sewn into the convertible's sun visor. "You ready?" "Been ready since the first time he locked me in the pantry," she said, light like a joke. He flinched, almost imperceptible. They both pretended not to notice. The road unspooled in a ribbon through cypress and cane, cicadas rattling loud enough to drown out second thoughts. The world after the blip was full of second thoughts, half-built houses, half-truth news, folks whispering about men in tan coats measuring time like it owed them a ledger. Out here, nobody in a coat came if you didn't invite them. By lunch, the convertible was nose-in along a sleepy brick front where a flag whipped half-heartedly. New cameras perched high in the eaves. A banner under the clock said "Community" strong in letters too cheery. Rogue pushed through the doors with her jacket zipped and her pulse steady. "Morning," the guard said. He was young and soft and sunburned where his sleeves ended. His name tag read WALT. He smiled the way people smiled before the world taught them to stop. She bumped his wrist with her gloved hand as she passed. Then she did something awful and useful. She slipped the glove back and let a sliver of skin kiss his. The lightest touch. A sip. It was a rush of noise in her head. Walt's breakfast biscuit, his song "Bad Country," the keypad he punched 5 times a day, 31794. She tasted his fear of messing up and pulled away before it turned into something that would make him nap on the floor for an hour. "Sorry," she said and meant it. Remy drifted in behind her, less a man than a shrug in a purple shirt. He kept his hands obvious, empty of anything you'd call a weapon if you weren't paying attention. The teller glass reflected him in duplicate. "Everyone stay cool," Rogue said, gentle as a teacher with a rowdy class. "We're leaving as soon as we're not here anymore." "And we ain't talkin' nobody's grocery money," Remy added. He dropped a single card on the marble floor. It hummed. The security camera overhead blinked, sparked, and died with a tiny purple sigh. Behind the counter, the keypad waited. Rogue's fingers hovered over the numbers she should not have known, then pressed, heart banging like a fist on a locked door. The back latch thunked. In the vault, stacks of cash sat in tidy rubber-banded towers, so neat it made her angry. They moved quick. 2 duffels, nothing greedy. Remy shouldered weight like he'd practiced lifting and running his whole life, because he had. He palmed a coin and flicked it into the hinge of a secondary lock that thought it was important. Violet bled along its edge and the lock popped like a hiccup. Someone shouted, someone cried, someone filmed. Rogue saw the phone and held up a hand. "You're gonna want to put that down." She didn't threaten. She asked. The girl lowered it because sometimes a voice that won't shake is enough. They were out and into the bright, heat slamming into them like a slammed door. The convertible coughed awake. The first drone came in low and neat, all angles and virtue, DODC stamped on its belly in white block letters. "Government toys," Remy said, almost admiring. He flipped a coin, the kind he kept behind his knuckles for luck. It went purple and then loud. The drone jittered midair and came apart politely, little pieces kissing the asphalt. 2 more drones arced over the diner roof. Rogue took the wheel, jacket creaking, boots planted, mouth a stripe of green defiance. Remy's hand braced on the dash as she shot the car into a narrow alley that wasn't supposed to be a road and jumped the curb with a squeal that sounded like laughter. They hit the causeway and the water flashed black and white under them. Remy twisted in his seat, picked off another drone with a card that sang as it flew. The last drone hung back, blinking thoughtful. It wasn't trying to catch them. It was watching. Mile marker 23, they cut right and then right again into a rutted track where willows broke the sunlight into coins. Rogue pulled into the shade and killed the engine. For a second, there was only the tick of hot metal cooling. Remy unzipped a duffel. The cash was there, sure, but nestled against it was a flat black square with a heartbeat of a light. He turned it over. DODC property. Serial 87ESX. His red pupils tightened. They tagged the take cheer. Rogue felt the weight of it in the air, like thunder so far away you only felt it in your teeth. She could hear sirens if she wanted to. She could hear the pantry door latch in the dark if she let herself. They wanted us to want this, she said. Remy looked at her over the device, Swampdark gaze steady. So, we keep running blind or we stop pretending. This is just road and romance. Somewhere out there, the last drone watched its little red light blink, calling in friends. The convertible ticked and cooled and waited for the next decision like it always had. Rogue pressed 2 fingers to her bright mouth and thought of the life they were stealing, and the lives someone else was buying with lists and lights. We pick our trouble, she said. Then pick, Remy said. She did not take his hand, but she stood close enough that the air between them felt like a promise. The tag in the duffel blinked like a patient heartbeat. Remy turned it in his palms, eyes catching red. The cypress knees around them stood like old men listening for gossip. That square ain't just tracking us, he said finally. It's calling supper for wolves. Rogue looked at the cash, neat bands biting into it. It should have felt like freedom. It felt like a leash. She tugged her glove tighter. Then we cut it loose. He didn't argue. They slid the duffel under the bench of a dented green pirogue they found half sunk in sawgrass. Remy pressed his hand to the trolling motor. Violet bled under his skin, through the casing, into the guts of it until the plastic gave a quiet, grateful shiver. Go on, petty bateau, he murmured, like he was coaxing a stray out from under a porch. He set the handle, stepped back. The boat eased out of the reeds and into a wide channel broken with light. Rogue watched the little red pulse move, nosing the water. She took the license plate off the convertible and rubbed it with mud until it read like a rumor. The drones came late, like cops to a rural call. 2, then 3, flying careful white block letters DODC on the bellies. They paused over the cove, lenses tasting the air, then angled toward the pirogue's blinking promise. Remy flicked a card after them that hummed in the water and popped a fern, just enough to keep their eyes on the wrong thing. Rogue slung her pack. We're smoke. They slid into the wetlands, calf-deep in cool brown. The convertible hid beneath a net draped with sawgrass and a fallen limb that made it look abandoned, like everything else out here that used to be loved. By nightfall, they were 3 towns south under neon that buzzed like bugs. A pawn shop sat across from a church marquee that said he has a plan, and beneath it, half the bulbs burned out so it read he has a PLA. Remy laughed at that like it meant something. Fun is a word people use for what you choose. They chose this, slipping in and out of other people's certainty. A credit union in Biloxi with a keypad they learned off a slight brush of fingers and a whoops, sorry. A savings and trust built into a strip mall in Beaumont where Remy turned a rack of cheap sunglasses into a blinking curtain that made cameras go blind. A rural bank in Selma with a vault lock older than the teller. He kissed a quarter and fed it into the hinge, and the hinge opened like it remembered being kind once. They never took greedy. 2 bags, sometimes 1. They wrote notes when someone looked like they needed a reason not to be scared. No one got hurt. If someone had a phone up, Rogue looked them in the eye and asked, "Put that down for me, please," and most hands shook and put it down. She hated the moments she had to touch. She took only what she had to: pin codes and keypad strokes and the quick sugar rush of someone else's morning, and she always whispered, "I'm sorry," that maybe no one heard. And then they gave it away. An envelope taped under the napkin dispenser at a diner in Lake Providence with a note for a waitress named Nia and a list of overdue bills. A stack of 20s slipped into the hand of a woman outside a shuttered clinic who didn't want to ask. 2 months back, rent handed to a man who'd been blipped and came home to his house gone, and his name wrong. They never stayed to see the opening of the envelopes. They were gone before gratitude could make them feel like liars. Stories sprouted in their wake like mildew after rain. Someone called them the Road Saints. Someone else said Bonnie and Clyde with manners. The internet gave them bad names and grainy frames, the green convertible in half of them like a ghost. They watched a bar TV flicker through a segment about enhanced threats and fiscal oversight, and a woman in a slate suit who had a stare that flattened the noise. The caption under her said D. DeWitt, DODC. She talked about accountability after certain tech events, and people in the bar nodded because someone on a television sounded tired and sane. She looked like she sleeps sitting up, Remy said. Rogue wiped a lime green print off the rim of her glass. She looks like she don't miss a wrong step. A man at the end of the bar stroked the edge of his beer and told them a story about time cops in drab jackets who appeared like a blink and snapped people out of the world for stepping off a path no one knew was there. He called them variants like it was a dirty word. Rogue didn't laugh. The pantry door in her head used to slam with no warning too. You believe in time cops cheer? Remy asked later, under a streetlight that hummed lonely. I believe in lists, she said, and folks who make 'em. Armor wars had shaken a lot more loose than Stark Tech. Banks had new toys and old grudges. DODC had a budget that tasted like forever. Twice, they found thin black wafers tucked in banded stacks that were DODC's usual tags. They were slicker, stamped ESX so small you had to squint. Remy turned one over like a bug under glass. Essex, he said, tongue heavy on the S, you seein' that too. Rogue shrugged like it didn't lodge in her ribs. Some contractor with a contract and no soul. She kept the wafer on her palm a second too long and saw white hallways and kids lined like inventory and the smell of bleach. She shut it down fast enough to make her knees go watery. They changed their rhythm. Cash got washed through hands, through envelopes, through time. They burned the bands. They didn't keep a stack longer than a day because paper turned into light and light called drones. On a Monday that smelled like fry oil and rain, they hit a credit union in a town where a tornado had chewed through roofs 3 months before, and no insurance checks had landed. Rogue thumbed the keypad with someone else's memory and opened the vault to neat, clean money that belonged to people who were not suffering. Remy held the door and watched the lobby, cards shining soft at his fingertips like fireflies. A little boy looked at him with open-mouthed wonder from behind his mama's skirt. Magic, the boy breathed. Remy tipped an invisible hat. Don't try this at home, petty loop. They were out in 3 minutes flat. A drone wheeled lazy above the Piggly Wiggly but didn't dive. Rogue tasted the machine watching. She could feel when eyes became sights. They didn't go back to their car. They cut through a dogleg of alley and a yard with a trampoline, hopped the fence into a stand of willows, and vanished because practice turns vanishing into a skill. That afternoon, they tucked bills into a church donation slot and taped an envelope to a mailbox with a note that said, I owe you nothing, and all the utilities paid, and their legend grew teeth. Not sharp ones, but ones that could bite through a locked door. The heat grew, too. Highway signs warned about enhanced criminality with a cheerful font like a bank commercial. A radio talk host used the words domestic and mutant in the same sentence like it wasn't a choice. Over Chicago, a blue-red streak lit a sky on every screen. The crawl read Captain Marvel dismantles illegal KRE salvage ring. Someone at a gas station said she could hear a scream from space. Someone else said it was just the air releasing heat. We ain't getting near that level of attention, Remy said, flipping a deck and catching the Rogue Queen without looking. Rogue licked her thumb and rubbed a fleck of mud off the convertible's dash. Then we keep our rules. All we take, we give. No one gets hurt. And when they try to hurt us, he asked quiet. She looked at her hand, at the glove that kept a dozen strangers from living in her head. We don't forgive systems, she said, but we forgive people who work inside them and don't see past the badge. The next morning, in the back of a thrift store with a Jesus shaking his head in a painting, Rogue opened a new stack and found 3 wafers like the first, slid subtle under the bands. When her glove brushed one, it warmed like it recognized her. They're not just tagging the duffels, Remy said. They learn in our habits. They had a window and they took it. The wetlands were always good for swallowing evidence and rumor. They drove past where the road gave up and eased the convertible under lace curtains of Spanish moss. A rusted airboat sat nearby on 2 flat tires like a dinosaur skeleton. Remy ran his palm along its throttle, filled it with borrowed lightning, and the fan hiccuped to life with a sigh like an old man waking. They packed the tagged bills and 2 extra throwers into a pair of garbage sacks and tied them tight. Remy shoved them under the airboat's front lip. He taped a card to the steering column and charged it just enough to throb gentle. Then he put one of the ESX wafers on the hull, like a sticker you couldn't peel off without a fight. "I hate this," Rogue said. "I know," he said, and meant more than the cash. He set the airboat loose with a slap. It skittered into the channel like a spooked animal and roared its rattletrap music. Within minutes, the first drone found it. The second followed. The third hung back and filmed, because that's what eyes do when they don't understand an angle. Rogue and Remy moved the other way, knee-deep in the cool brown. They left one card pulsing on a log to the west and another on a cypress stump to the south, a crooked breadcrumb trail of violet beats. The drones took the bait because machines, like people, love patterns. They waited until the mud went to sand, and the sand went to the soft give of a path used by no one but deer and folks who don't want to be found. The airboat's noise faded into the hum of insects and the long, slow breath of the swamp. At dusk, they crawled up under a bridge where the concrete sweated and painted their faces with river dust. A bass slap marked the surface like a polite applause. "We keep going," he said. "We keep going," she echoed. She didn't take his hand, but she leaned where her shoulder could feel the heat of him through leather, and the space between them felt like a vow you said soft so it wouldn't break. Somewhere beyond the trees, drones chased ghosts across the water. The green convertible waited under moss, a patient animal ready for the next bad decision made for the right reason. The green convertible ate the miles like it had something to prove. Cypress and billboards traded places on either side of I-10, water flashing between slats of guardrail. Rogue's boots were up on the dash until a trooper passed. She dropped them with a thud and wiped a print of lime off her lower lip with her thumb. "Keep our heads down," she said around a breath of spearmint. "New rule for the day." Remy rolled a card across his knuckles, purple breathing under the ink like it had a pulse. "Cheer, I got a face made for up," he said, grin quick, eyes catching every red light in the world. His grin died with the first smear of black smoke ahead. It rose hard and ugly over the causeway, a fist punching the big blue. Traffic slowed in a ripple of brake lights, then stopped. Horns talked to no one. The smell hit, hot metal and sugar turned bitter. Rogue's shoulders went tight. "We can turn around." A siren wailed somewhere behind. Another answered it. The smoke kept climbing. Remy stared down the packed line of cars like he could will them out of his way. Beyond the wall of stopped vehicles, something bright pulsed once, twice, fire licking over steel. He killed the engine and swung out. "We ain't turning around." "Keep our heads down," Rogue repeated, quieter, but she was already unbuckling. Her glove snugged hard into place. She hopped the guardrail behind him, leather jacket flaring like a hawk's wing. They ran the shoulder. Remy's boots slapped rhythm, Rogue's breath counting in her chest. Past a minivan, a man prayed with both hands on the wheel. Past an old Buick, two teens filmed the smoke, saying whoa, whoa, whoa like it could do anything. Past a pickup whose bed had two dogs pacing and whining, eyes rolling white. The crash was a tangle where asphalt met open water and a sugarcane truck had kissed a tanker too hard. Cane stalks lay like spilled bones across 3 lanes. The tanker's trailer was on its side, painted warnings hissing steam, a flame chewing the far end. A church van sat sideways with its nose in the guardrail, windows starred. Someone inside banged a palm print against the glass. "Propane," Remy said, words clipped. "We got minutes." A young EMT was kneeling by a man on the ground, palms on his chest, rhythm off. Her face looked too clean in all that mess. Rogue dropped to her knees beside her. "Let me." "I've got," the EMT began, and Rogue reached, skin to skin, and whispered, "I'm sorry." The jolt hit like a door kicked open. Training slid into Rogue's head with the EMT's heartbeat, a full-body memory of drills in bright rooms with clean air. She placed her hands exactly where they needed to be, changed the tempo. 30-2, she said, the knowledge tasting like someone else's coffee. "You breathe for him on 2. The EMT stared, eyes blown wide. "What did you?" "Not now," Rogue said. The man under her coughed a vowel back into the world. She laughed, ugly and relieved, and moved, because there were too many needs and her brain had a new map of them. Remy ran for the church van. A woman's voice inside was breaking on the same name over and over. He rapped his knuckles against the glass. "Hang tight." He slid a card between door and frame and fed it a spoon of power, tender as it would take. The lock popped with a puff of smoke and a hiccup of plastic. He got the door open on the second try. "Y'all ever crawled through a window for a prize?" he said, voice easy on purpose. "Prize this time Bane, not breath and fumes." The boy shoved at him first, too scared to be polite. Remy hauled him through and turned him toward the shoulder with a pat. The woman came next, then a baby squalling because that's what babies do when the air is wrong. A state trooper ran toward them, hat gone, face red. Back away, he yelled, pointing at the tanker with a shaking hand. Everybody back. Remy risked a look. Fire ran like gossip along the far side of the tanker, chittering into the belly. He hopped the van's wheel well and slid down the other side to the tanker's dome. He pressed his palm to the steel. He could feel heat and panic under his skin, like a thing alive. He pulled a short out of his pocket, a stub of a card wrapped in black tape. Don't, the trooper said, a gun somewhere in his voice. I'm not blowing your road to Jesus, Remy said. He wedged the charge under a stuck valve and fed it light, whispering something in Cajun French under his breath. He calculated the thinnest line he could walk. The card hiccuped, a cough of heat, and the seized valve juddered. A secondary vent coughed open and took a deep breath. The flame stuttered, then steadied in a different place, away from the belly. Pressure bled. The tanker sang lower. Phones were up everywhere now. A teenage voice said, Yo, he just made that blow with a playing card, rising awe and fear the same pitch. Rogue moved like she'd done this for years, because she had, except that she who had done it belonged to a woman who would go home later and shake. She hauled a door that didn't want to leave its hinges because she knew where to put her feet. She wrapped a bleeding arm tight because she knew the ratio to stop flow without killing fingers. She looked up and saw a driver pinned under the cane truck's cab, face white under a skin of oil. I got you, she said, voice steady for him. For herself, it was a coin toss. She braced and pulled. The cab gave, but not enough. She looked around for muscle and found a man in a once white shirt with shoulders like a refrigerator. He was trying to lift from the wrong angle, teeth bared. Sir, she said, glove up, palm open. I need what you got for a breath. He blinked at the glove, then at her mouth, then at the man pinned, and nodded. She pulled the glove with her teeth and clapped her hand to his wrist. Strength rolled into her in a hot wave. Her vision doubled, a backyard, kids yelling, a night shift, sore hands, an ache in the lower back that said this is every day. His love of his people was a hard, simple thing. It steadied her better than any training. She gripped the cab again. Metal screamed. The pinned driver slid free with a cry that made her feel like she'd pulled herself out from under something too. The trooper's hand was on his radio and on his gun and on his duty, and he looked at Rogue like she was two things at once, help and a problem. Ma'am, you need to. Rogue lifted both hands, palms open, letting the trooper see empty. We're leaving when we can. She could feel her control fraying around the edges, the borrowed memories seeping into places they shouldn't. The EMT's voice in her head counted compressions. The big man's back ached. She swallowed someone else's curse. Behind them, Remy tossed a card high. It spun, caught the sun, landed on a jammed hinge of the sugarcane truck's tailgate. He snapped his fingers. The hinge let go with a polite pop instead of a scream. Cane stalks slithered like snakes out of the truck's bed, clearing a path like a green river. You can't discharge explosives on my scene, the trooper yelled. The camera phones loved that. Remy put up his hands. It's math and manners, officer. She saved 3. I saved your bad day from growing teeth. Sirens grew closer, all the blue in the world arriving. A fire truck bullied space out of traffic and shouldered beside the tanker. A woman shoved past the trooper and grabbed Rogue in a hug that was hot and full of baby and thanks. Rogue held very still, glove back on, careful not to steal the moment from her. Ma'am, the trooper tried again, low now. You gotta come with me, both of you. Rogue looked at the cameras. We ain't the story, she said. They are. She nodded toward the EMT, already back on her feet, giving the kind of orders that become prayer. Remy found Rogue's shoulder with his eyes. She gave a thin nod. They moved as one, over the guardrail, down the embankment where the wild things grew, under the causeway where the water licked concrete. The sound of the world up above became a muffled roar like rain. Video's already up, Remy said, checking the tilt of his hood. Reception down here was a rumor, but he could feel a tension like heat on his skin. We ain't ghosts anymore. Rogue leaned against a pillar, leather scraping rough concrete. Her pulse hammered. The memories in her head buzzed like a crowded room. She pressed her gloved palm to her forehead. We never were. By the time they crawled back up to the car, the smoke was thinner. The convertible sat obedient where they'd left it, moss dusting its paint like old lace. They slid in and let the engine purr them back into the line of cars that forgot to breathe until they could move again. News chased them down the radio before they hit the next exit. In breaking traffic news, a multi-vehicle collision on I-10 near the Atchafalaya Basin Bridge. Eyewitness video appears to show enhanced individuals intervening. Viewer discretion is advised. A second station called them dangerous vigilantes who nearly blew a tanker. A third played audio of a woman crying thank you into a mic. A kid online edited Remy's card pop with an 8-bit sound and the caption Road Saints, do not try at home. A different voice came on, level, tired, with the weight of briefing rooms in it. We're aware of the incident, she said. We ask all citizens to refrain from interfering in emergencies. Department of Damage Control is investigating. Remy turned it up. The name under the voice said Deirdre DeWitt. The stare in her headshot missed nothing. In a room far from the wet heat, DeWitt clicked replay twice on a clip where Rogue's bare hand came down on the EMT's wrist, and the EMT jerked like a wire pulled tight. She paused it on Rogue's face. Wild brown hair with a white streak burning against smoke, a mouth stained green, and on the man beside her whose cards breathed light. Put a flag on their plates, a supervisor said from the doorway. If they've got plates. They change them, DeWitt said. Mud magnets habit. She rubbed her eyes with her thumb and index finger. No smudge left because she didn't wear mascara to work anymore. They kept people alive. They also weaponized something on a hazmat scene. DeWitt looked at the timestamp, the angle, the way the trooper's hand had been on his radio and then not on his gun. If you want a recommendation, I'll write. Assigned to enhanced, non-lethal engagement. Keep local PD out of it before someone does something that can't be forgiven. The supervisor breathed out. It's yours. She nodded, not like thanks, more like a door she'd walk through either way. On her monitor, the clip replayed, phones up like a forest of glass, a pair of kids who didn't look like monsters saving people who didn't look like heroes. Essex was a separate folder on her desktop, grayed out, quiet for now. She dragged a new file onto her screen and typed a name someone else had given them. Road Saints. She deleted it. She typed unknown pair Atchafalaya. She added, do not underestimate. Back in the car, a billboard rolled by that said he has a plan with the same burned out bulbs as before, and Remy laughed once, like it meant something different today. They got our faces, Rogue said softly. Our names go next. You want to quit? He asked, not like teasing. She watched the rear view, where a sky-high drone blinked a white eye and then faded back into blue. I want to not be chased for putting my hands where they can do some good, but wanting don't change the hunt. She drew a breath steadier. We keep our rules. And when they come. She touched the seam of her glove, feeling the press of other people like a pressure change she could learn to ride. We forgive the ones reaching for orders. We don't forgive the ones written them. And we keep going. The convertible slid off the interstate onto a smaller road that smelled like rain and cut grass. Behind them, the smoke was a darker stripe on the horizon. Ahead, New Orleans was a story and a problem, and somewhere in a slate-walled room, a woman with a badge put their faces in a file. Rogue checked her reflection in the side mirror. The green on her mouth looked like a dare. She smudged it anyway and kept driving. The sign for Galaxy Wheels flickered from a ditch of cattails and soda cans, a neon Saturn blinking like it needed a nap. The green convertible idled long enough to steam the bugs off its hood. Then Rogue pulled into the gravel and killed the engine. The bayou behind the lot held its breath, black and flat as a pane of glass. You're sure? Remy asked, watching a family spill out of a dented minivan. Ain't exactly low profile to go rollin' in circles under disco lights. Rogue checked the side mirror, thumbed a smear of lime back onto her mouth. The white streak in her hair caught the fluorescent and went ghost bright. We keep our rules, she said, and we keep our heads from break-in. That means an hour where nobody screams and nothing explodes. Inside smelled like sugared ice and polyurethane. A scratched-up DJ booth thumped out a playlist stapled together from 3 different decades. A sign instructed, no speed skating during family hour and please no power blasters. The rental counter clerk had a half-healed black eye and a ring on a chain. She took one look at Rogue's boots and grinned. We got a size that says I can stop without my life flashing. Rogue slid her jacket off and kept the gloves. The green shirt she wore hugged muscle born of work, not gym mirrors. Give me something honest, she said. Remy accepted skates like a dare and laced them slow, his thumbs steady, the purple of his sleeveless shirt dark in the rink's banana-colored light. Cher, if I bust my tailbone, you owe me all the sympathy. I'll buy you a cherry ICE, Rogue said. Consider it hazard pay. They stepped onto the wood and felt it answer their weight, a new kind of balance. Remy wobbled, then found a rhythm like pool steps, knee, knee, push. Rogue took 2 test passes, then let herself roll, breath settling, the long tightness of the day easing in her shoulders. The old men who treated the rink like church had their usual lane, knees soft, faces set. Kids labored in clots, hands linked, gravity winning and losing by turns. Someone had thrown glitter earlier. It was everywhere. By their third loop, eyes had clocked them. Phones came out like a reflex, but not many. The regulars had a code about that. A schoolgirl in a threadbare hoodie whispered "Road Saints" and then bit her lip like she wasn't sure she should have said it out loud. Remy slid closer, his wheels whispering over the grain. "You see that?" "Saw it long before we pulled up," Rogue said. "It's different now. We're a story that talks back. They make us folk songs. We still ring like an alarm to the wrong ears," Remy said. He flicked his wrist and a playing card danced between his fingers, catching a thread of light and giving it back. He did not feed it his charge. Not here. He reached, not quite touching her, his knuckles hovering a breath from her glove. She felt the same old ache and the same new steadiness. On her other side, a boy tried to skate backward and immediately discovered gravity. Rogue eased a hand over without thinking. The glove bumped the boy's elbow. "Bend your knees, Tiger. You ain't taller than the floor." He laughed and did what she said and didn't fall this time. His mom mouthed thanks as they went by. Rogue lifted her hand and still didn't touch anyone with skin. The borrowed voices from the bridge rode low in her chest, like radio static under a song. Compressions, 30 to 2. Back won't quit, not at this wage, baby breathe. She could ride it. For now. At the break, they grabbed the snack bar and 2 paper cups that sweated syrup onto their palms. They sat on a bench with scabbed hearts carved into it and watched a couple older than the rink slow dance by on wheels. "You all right in your head?" Remy asked without the softness that would make her guard go up. She took a sip, let the ice bite her lip. "I was 6 different people for an hour on that bridge," she said. "I got their aches, Remy. I got a hymn I don't even know the words to. I got a kid's voice stuck to the back of my teeth. Feels like I could breathe out and fog would come out of my mouth that ain't mine." Remy nodded once. "Pick one and sit with it a while," he said. "Rest of M can take a number. You decide where the chairs go." She looked at him, something resentful in the corner of her gaze because he made it sound like dealing cards. Then the resentment let go because he was the one who set up a table for chaos and called it a game he could win. "Deal me a quiet one, then." He reached into his pocket and tapped a card against her gloved palm. "That EMT. The way you took what she knew and gave it back. Keep that one." The DJ took the mic and asked who in here needed help keeping the lights on after the blip. "Come see the desk. We got a jar that's been blessed by every skater in Lafferge Parish." The clerk with the black eye didn't look up as Rogue slipped 200s in, crisp and clean, no bank tape. Compassion could be quiet and anonymous and still count. They left before the DJ switched to couples only and sent a different ache through the room. Outside, night lay heavy and hot. Cricket stitched a loud seam between ditch and road. The convertible made the slow, familiar click of cooling metal like a horse shaking its bridle. Rogue checked the sky for the calm circle of a drone and saw only stars. She still took their conversation to the payphone by the busted soda machine. Remy leaned against the booth, watching the parking lot and the oil stains like maps to nowhere. The third ring carried a voice that smelled like chicory and magnolia. "You call me, Petty Volder. You must be desperate or lonely." "Bonjour, Tante Mattie," Remy said, and the swagger that lived in his bones went respectful. "Bonjour to the girl while you at it," she said, hearing Rogue breathe. "I seen you two on all the little screens. I saw the fire and the not dying." Rogue held the receiver tight with a gloved hand. "We ain't looking to be saints. We're trying to do what we can and not get caged for it." The old woman considered without hurry. "You think to buy yourself new names, new car, new papers like it's 2007. That's why you call me." Remy closed his eyes briefly, a smile not quite making it. "You still got a man can print me a life that reads at an airport." "I have a man can print you a life that reads at a parish line," Tante said. "Airport is a different country now. You listen to me. The letters you find in your money, ESX, they ain't just stickers. Essex is reaching into the places folks think are safe. Blood drives in church basements. Cheap genetic tests to tell you your grandma come from County Clare. DMV scans. They lookin' for a hymn in your blood like the one the girl hearin'." Rogue's throat worked. The static in her chest flared, then narrowed like a spotlight. "Taggin' us. Taggin' the gene like a deer in the swamp, baby. DODC is a fisherman with a net. Essex is the man countin' the fish and pickin' through the catch. You buy new names, you still carry the same song in your vein. Remise Josette, so what's the play taunt? I seen paper move faster than blood, but only one of them burn clean. Your names, your faces, they live in a place don't have to. There's a warehouse by the water where the air hums wrong. Folks call it a DMV extension. It ain't. They keep the lists there. She lowered her voice like the phone line could hear fear. Erase yourself from the world before you buy yourself into it. Then you come see me for the rest. I'll have chicory on. A truck rattled past, rattier than it had to be. Remy watched it to the end of the lot and did a math with his eyes that looked like checking rhythm. You got a name for that place. People whisper it like a curse, Bayou Node. You didn't hear it from me, and I didn't say you should go because I like you alive. She breathed out smoke and years. Time put new dogs on the road, Cher, stay clever. The motel 2 miles up had a sign that read color TV and no hourly rates with a second sign beneath that said, don't ask the desk. They paid cash. The clerk behind thick glass never looked away from the nature documentary he'd turned too loud. Heron stabbed fish in slow motion. Unit 12 smelled like citrus cleaner and someone else's rain. The bedspread had been laundered back into politeness, but not enough innocence to fool anyone. Remy deadbolted. Rogue checked the seams of the curtains and pulled them tight until the lights outside only made a thin bruise on the ceiling. They sat in opposite chairs for the first 5 minutes and talked like the chairs were miles apart. We quit, Rogue said, laying the words out to see how they looked. Find some county that don't ask too many questions. We do drywall and read paperbacks from a spinner rack at the bait shop. Remy worked a card across his knuckles, the movement small and quiet, no light, just the comfort of well-worn edges. They'll find us in the dry wall. They know our curve now, cheer. Or we do one last score, she said. Buy our way into something clean. He shook his head before she finished. Paper don't beat blood, you heard Maddie. Rogue looked at her gloved hands, then past them, to the place his touch didn't reach until she let it. Maybe the last score ain't money. Maybe it's the list. Remy let out a breath that wasn't a laugh but remembered how. You stealin' my job title. We walk into Bayou Node and we erase our names, our songs. We take anybody else we can carry with us off it, and then we go buy new lives from the last person left I trust you with. He stared at the curtains, at the thin bruise of light. It's not a bank with sleepy guards, that's a nest. We've been in worse nests, Rogue said, but the way she said it betrayed an echo of a white corridor and a hand that smelled like antiseptic. And if we run now, we leave 100 kids walking around lit up to people who make them disappear. I can't forgive that. He looked at her then, really looked, at the green on her mouth smudged where she'd bit the inside of her lip, at the wild hair that wouldn't settle, at the way her shoulders stayed squared even when she was tired enough to fold. He stood and came as close as the old rules let him. He reached, and she cupped her gloved hand to his jaw, leather over stubble, a touch that counted. He kissed the leather and closed his eyes. One last score, he said to the room and the bruise of light. We pull the thread and see which liars fall down. Rogue nodded, and if it goes bad, we keep our rules. He made a face. No casualties, unless they write the orders. Even then, she said after a beat, forgive where we can, take away the weapon, not the hand. The TV in the office clicked channels and landed on a panel show. A woman with steel in her short hair and a badge on her lapel told a host that vigilantes complicated first response. The crawl read, DODC Agent Deirdre DEWITT on enhanced incidents. A corner box showed footage from the bridge cut short before the part where a man lived again. Another panelist mentioned an Avenger by name and a headline that yanked the world into every room. Captain Marvel seen consulting on Earth-based enhanced THREATS. Rogue watched the blur of the picture of a woman with silver at her temples and a stare like the edge of a blade. Remy flicked off their unit's TV with the heel of his hand. Let M talk. We'll be busy. They pulled a thrift store atlas from the glove compartment and spread it on the bed like a tablecloth. Remy circled Bayou words with a pen that bled. Rogue drew a line from the rink to a warehouse that wasn't on the map and didn't need to be. When the night got quiet enough to hear their own breathing, the voices in Rogue's chest faded to a choir that didn't drown her. She lay on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling stain shaped like a crescent. Remy sat with his back to the door, boots on, cards in his hand, eyes half closed, half awake. They rested in the only way the hunted do, by deciding what comes next and daring to think it might be enough. Their old green car waited under a streetlight outside. a little island where they could always get back in and go. Perseverance looked like that tonight. 4 wheels, a plan, and 2 people who refused to let the world decide what they were. In the morning, they'd head for the quarter and the woman who brewed coffee like spells. But now they used their 1 hour where nothing screamed and nothing blew, and they held it between them like a small, warm thing. Dawn came in sideways through the quarter, soft and cigarette blue. Taunt Mattie's shotgun house wore bead strings like old medals, and the porch boards remembered every foot that had crossed them. The bayou air wandered in from the canals, sweet with rot and cypress. The green convertible idled in the alley like a patient animal, hood steamed from the night's damp. Mattie opened the door before they knocked. She was small and iron-backed, hair wrapped in a scarf the color of pecans, eyes the color of coffee. "You came," she said, which sounded exactly like "I told you not to and I saved you anyway." Rogue slipped her brown leather jacket off one shoulder, the white streak in her hair an honest flag in the house's dim. Lime painted her mouth into a dare she half meant. Remy stood behind her, sleeveless purple shirt leaving his arms to their own devices, cards ghosting through his fingers, not lit, not yet. "Smell that?" Mattie asked, tilting her head toward the open kitchen. "Chicory, I promised you." They took their mugs at the little table with its scar of burn marks and family pictures under the glass. One of the pictures was a newspaper clipping of a star-haired woman punching a hole in a sky full of smoke, the caption old enough to add 10 years. Carol Danvers, older now, still on every crawl when the world needed a hammer. Rogue's eyes caught the photo and slid off it like a tongue from a cracked tooth. "We ain't given anyone a reason to bring her here," she said. Mattie laughed without much joy. "She don't need reasons, baby, she has summons." She tapped the table. "You want the node, I'll give you what I know, you won't like it." Remy leaned in. "We ain't ever liked our odds before and look at us, still pretty." "Pretty don't beat doors." Mattie laid out a folded map like a hand of spades. The grid of canal and industrial road bled into the lake. She tapped a rectangle by a scrub of grass called a pump station in bureaucrat speak. "Front sign says DMV extension. The hum you hear when the wind sits, that's not air handlers, that's a phase generator," she said. "Essex brought it to them, made it sound like magic. It's a sieve. Splits noise from signal. You got something singing in your blood. That room hum finds the chorus." Rogue's jaw worked. Jean sniffers. "Dogs that bite but don't bark. Guard rotation is 8-4 midnight. They run vans through the waterside dock every 6 hours. No plates, no manifests, lots of clipboards that say nothing. Cameras are fisheye, mounted in the soffit and float on a gimbal. They see farther than they look. Drones sleep in the rafters. Tag ESX-19, wake on adrenaline spikes, and this is important, on kinetic release. So you boy," she flicked her chin at Remy, "save your fireworks until you need to blow the boat." Remy's card stalled. "How they know kinetic like mine?" "Because they built something that likes it," Mattie said, voice flat. She slid 2 ID cards across the table, stay-tissue ugliness with different names and past-gray faces. "Borrowed chips. Scan at the door, you look like a contractor from Baton Rouge who smells like oil. And this." She set a small bundle of feathers, thread, and a bent key between them. "You put it near their readers, it sings the wrong song for half a breath. Might skip you past a lock, might break and do nothing. I made it with a woman who owes me, and wants to owe me less." Rogue rubbed her thumb over the bent key through her glove. "And if it goes bad?" "Don't fight the men doing their job for a paycheck," Mattie said. "They ain't your enemy. Forgive fools who can learn, break the things that can't." Her eyes flicked up hard enough to hammer a nail. "You hear me, Remy?" He lifted his palms, the picture of innocence that had no alibi. "I hear." She looked at Rogue, and for a second the old woman's hands trembled before they were fists again. "They took somebody's boy out of barber shop in Plaquemine last month. Said voluntary screening and his mama ain't seen him since. There's a room in there they call evidence. It smells like a dentist office and sorrow. If you see that room, you do what you can." Rogue nodded once. "We will." They left through the alley, the convertible a green promise slick with dew. Remy dropped into the driver's seat and flicked a card against the steering wheel with the faintest breath of violet under the paper, just enough to calm his hands. Rogue tucked the gree-gree under her jacket collar, engine rumbling under her boots like a heart you could sit on. Perseverance had a sound, and it was this car. Bayou Node kept its secrets behind a chain-link fence and the lie of a state office. The breeze brought the hum to them before the sign did, a bass note in the bones, like a swarm of electric bees. Sodium lights through jaundiced halos in puddles. A man in a slate jacket smoked at the employee entrance, watching nothing with the weary patience of a father of 4. Rogue stepped into the glow with contractor ID clipped to her pocket, lips the color of a dare. "Plumbin' test," she said, and the man did what you do with someone in a hard hat. He shrugged and held the door. Inside was clean, bright blank. Everything was the same color of apology. Their first two doors took the chips. The third needed the key. Rogue pressed Maddie's charm until the bent metal warmed, until the thread hummed against the plastic like a bug on a screen, and the red light blinked to green. Remy let out a breath he didn't admit he was holding. Records Bay sat at the end of a corridor that smelled like air that had been folded and refolded too many times. A man behind glass blinked through them as if they were a smudge he could wipe away later. Remy slid into the console bank like it was a bar he could run. He laid a card on the metal and let a wash of violet move through copper so delicate nothing rang awake. The screen poured lists, contractors, infractions, cross-refs. And then deeper, on a drive someone had renamed janitor in a fit of arrogance, genetic flags labeled anomalous. His and Rogue's names lived there, not names exactly, but what their bodies said in code. Kinetic conversion, candidate asset, contact absorption unstable. And under it a column that wasn't DODC lexicon at all, Essex vendor ref. "I can burn us right now," he said, fingers poised, power taste like batteries in his mouth. Rogue leaned over him. In the reflection, her white streak cut the screen in half. "Do it." He did. Files hissed away, a rain of zeros, leaving holes where his and her ghost had sat. Another folder jumped on its own elsewhere like a fish out of a bucket. Intake, MINORS. He could have shut his eyes and not seen it. He didn't. He clicked. The feed showed a room with plexiglass and sleep. 4 beds. 4 kids who made sleep look like surrender. IV bags hung from metal trees. A label in the corner. Evidence, Cleveland, PLAQUMINE, Jackson, Gulfport. Rogue's hand closed on the back of his chair. "We came to erase paper." "We can leave," he offered, automatic as a breath. She was already moving. "We don't." They found the elevator with a keyhole instead of buttons. The charm failed them, whining against a lock that wanted blood and got none. Rogue stepped into the hallway and caught a junior officer coming around with a coffee balanced on a clipboard. He was 25 and tired and had eyes that went to kindness before suspicion. He looked at her and almost smiled. She let her gloves slide, 2 fingers bare. A brush, no more, like a moth wing. She took a breath in and his last 3 mornings came with it. Code, code, joke about donuts, code. She tasted sugar and laundry detergent and the cut-price cologne his girlfriend hated. She put it down as gentle as she could. "What's your name?" she asked. "Bo," he said, like he'd been asked a fair question. "Bo, take your break," she said softly. "That machine will still be here when you're back." She pressed the keypad with the code she'd borrowed and didn't keep, because some things you give back. Evidence wasn't a word that fit the room they walked into. It was a lullaby with a gag. Remy knew the smell Maddie promised before it hit him, antiseptic with a twist of elemental sadness. 4 kids. A girl whose freckles looked like stars under fluorescent moons, a boy with a shaved head and the ghost of a church cross in his tan line, a child so slight every rib was a ladder. Monitors blinked rhythms the hum tried to eat. Rogue spoke the soft language she'd stolen on the causeway. "Okay, baby, breathe," she murmured, reading the numbers, watching for the drop that meant somebody had fiddled the drugs. She found the slider on a pump labeled ESX, SED8, thinking not here, not now. She eased them awake in a trickle, not a flood. The freckled girl's eyes opened and filled with too much world. She flinched at Rogue's gloved hand, then did not when Rogue kept it there, leather a promise. "What's your name?" Rogue asked. "Cleo," the girl whispered. The space above her bed wavered, and for a second a field of clover appeared at hospital height, green and impossible. Then it snapped away. The hum grabbed it and ground it. Diego's hand pulled a tray toward him without touching it. A screw skated, greedy as a minnow. "Where's my mama?" he said, voice breaking itself into 2 pieces. "On the other side of this door," Rogue lied kindly. "We'll get you to her." Alarms noticed kindness and misunderstood. A light stuttered near the ceiling. In the rafters, one of the drones rolled in its cradle like a waking wasp. ESX-19 etched on its shell, delicate legs opening. Remy flicked a card and then didn't throw it, remembering Maddie's warning. He palmed it instead, stepped under the drone and reached, coaxing rather than breaking. He fed it the smallest spark, a sip of wrong, and the drone dreamed of a full belly and stayed asleep. Agent Deirdre DeWitt watched a schematic of the node blink from her office across the river, a square of red lighting like a bruise under glass. Her slate suit looked slept-in, coffee cold. The alert header read, "Anomalous Access Evidence Ward, Essex Vendor NOTIFIED." Another line crawled beneath. Consult. Danvers ping sent. She rubbed a thumb over the side of her face, then overrode two subroutines that would have locked the ground doors. Give me camera 6, she told nobody the room recognized. The feed wavered into focus. A girl in a brown leather jacket and a boy with red pupils and hands that made Light behave like a pet. The girl's body language around the beds was all EMT and anger. Deirdre's mouth went thin. She keyed in a pause to the drone wake protocol. A small sin. A bigger one waited. 5 minutes, she told the room. The room did not argue. Time to go, Remy said to Rogue, not because he wanted to, but because he was counting beats. He cut the strap on the smallest kid with a careful thumb and felt every place he had ever broken a rule feel holy. They moved. Rogue slung one child over her hip, another by the hand. Cleo walked on noodle legs, the clover showing itself for 2 steps at a time to make the floor kinder. Diego made screws rattle in the lights and then stopped because the hum frowned. Bo stood at the end of the hall, a hand on his radio, his mouth a line of duty, his eyes a storm of doubt. He saw children. He saw Rogue's glove and Remy's eyes, and the radio didn't make it to his mouth. You didn't see us, Rogue said softly, and he believed it because he wanted to. Forgiveness landed in the space between them like a white flag nobody raised. They hit the loading dock. The lake slapped pilings with the old rhythm. Remy popped the gate lock with the card he'd been starving, and it ate, bright and quick, metal coughing sparks without waking the horn. The night outside was free and not safe. Deirdre watched them slip into the dark, her finger hovering over dispatch. On another screen, a gold streak scratched the upper atmosphere, fast as summer lightning and meaner. The consult had read the ping. Don't be heroes, Deirdre said to the empty room, and knew it was too late for everyone in this story. The kids folded into the convertible like they'd been born to ride backseats that smelled like leather and gum. Rogue slid behind the wheel and the car took her weight like prayer. Remy hopped the dock, boots hitting asphalt with intent. The engine turned over, loud enough to wake questions. They peeled onto the road, taillights throwing red ribbons. A tickle started up Rogue's arm, a little buzz she wanted to scratch and couldn't. One of the IV ports in the smallest kid's arm pulsed faintly, a soft blue under skin. Remy saw it too. His mouth went hard. Tag inside, he said. Tracker. Rogue's voice had no room for fear and all of it for anger. Essex didn't lose their fish. They attached the line. Behind them, over the lake, something bright drew a line through the clouds, far and fast. In the rear view, Agent Danvers was a rumor no one needed to believe to be true. The hum had followed them into the night. Rogue gripped the wheel until the leather heated under her gloves. They had come to erase a list. They left with the reason they'd never outrun one again. Buckle up, she told the kids, because sometimes being a hero was as small and hard as that. We keep moving. The convertible 8 miles like stale bread, the road a dark ribbon flanked by black water and cane. The kids were a tangle of knees and blankets in the back, heads bumping with every dip. The little one, Laney, they'd learned when she whispered it like it was a secret, slept with her arm tucked to her chest, and that IV port glowing a soft, traitor blue beneath the bruise. Rogue drove hunched in her brown leather, white streak cutting through the dark hair that had escaped her hood. Lime painted her mouth into something braver than she felt. Remy rode shotgun, sleeveless purple catching the dash light in strips, cards slipping and whispering through his fingers, not charged, not yet. The hum they'd stolen on their way out of the node had followed, a bass note under everything, like a storm that hadn't decided where to land. Laney's tag is pingin' like a church bell, Remy said, glancing back. We got to smother it or break it. Smother, Rogue said. Don't wake anything you can avoid. She eased the car down a service road that cut toward a half-lit truck stop. A sign blinked Hush Puppy and Diesel in 3 letters and a ghost of 2. 2 minutes. In and out. The lot smelled like grease and river. Rogue took a breath that tasted like old cigarettes and yesterday's coffee, then slid behind to the trunk. Cleo, baby, she said to the freckled girl rubbing sleep from her eyes. You give me a little field. Make a corner of this lot look uninteresting. Cleo squinted, and for a breath the air above their trunk flickered into a wash of clover and dappled shade, a picnic nobody wanted to look at twice. The edges wavered, the hum gnawed at it. Still, it was enough. Rogue sat Laney on the bumper. Look at me, she said, voice soft and shaped like the EMT's training she still carried. This'll be quick. She peeled one glove, just 2 fingers bare, and let them rest next to the port. She breathed in the way she'd learned on the causeway, slow, square, gentle, and dipped into the little girl's skin like a toe in winter water. Laney's fear came like static first, then a soft pulse of something that wanted to be a rhythm. Rogue took just enough to understand the track of the port, where the plastic lance hid under skin. She took the edge off pain until her own arm ached in sympathy. "Remy," she said, and he was there with a penknife flamed clean on a lighter and wrapped in a napkin. "Foil," he muttered, tearing gum wrappers and building a shine around the port, his touch nimble as prayer. "We make a lil hat for their whisper." He wrapped Laney's arm in silver, then slid the knife shallow, more breath than cut. The port came out slick with a ribbon of blue. Remy trapped it in a to-go ketchup cup and closed the lid. The little light blinked like a firefly under plastic. A shadow rolled over the lights, not a cloud. The hush-puppy letters blinked, recovered, blinked again. Remy's head snapped up. "Drones," he said. "Not the sleepy ones. See how the power hiccuped. They're sipping the line." Two insects the size of dinner plates sailed in, glossy black, their undersides orange with hazard chevrons and ESX-19 etched neat as a signature. They didn't bother with a warning chirp. The first folded a lattice out of itself and fired a net toward the kids. The second flared a sensor, reading for heat and heartbeat, and Remy could feel it in his teeth. Kinetic scent. "Down," Rogue threw herself sideways and hit the net with her forearm. It stuck like Velcro and tightened. She grabbed it with her bare fingers and felt her own skin try to bite. It wanted to take from her. She took first, the tiniest sip from Laney still in her, that pulse folded in her chest. She let it hum soft into her hand, a stutter of wrong rhythm. The net twitched as if the air dropped out from under it, then sagged slack. Remy stepped forward and didn't throw. He palmed a card to the drone's side and fed it a whisper of charge, a wobble that made the gyros forget up. It listed and clipped the diesel pump canopy. "Stay hungry, Petty," he told the second drone and gave it nothing. Trucks at the far end of the lot idled like beasts. Two headlights cracked to life, then two more. Pickups rolled in with their windows down and their plates clean. Men in caps and vests with no logos got out, shoes that said contractor, posture that said shooter. The first jacket hung open to show a lanyard with a tidy white E stitched at the bottom. Essex had budgeted for local hands. "Kids don't need to be part of this," Rogue called, voice up and even, leather creaking when she straightened. She put her glove back on, felt the tremble in her fingers settle when cloth met skin. "Walk away, you can keep your knees." One of them smiled like a tip jar. "Ma'am, we got a respectable offer for returning stolen property." He flicked a look at Laney and Diego and away again, practicing not seeing children as anything but inventory. Remy's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You charge more when you can't count," he said, and flicked 3 coins at their feet. They rang bright and the men flinched. Nothing exploded. The coins stuck to their steel toes, a magnetic hum pinning boot to boot. The second step tangled the first and they crashed like a bad bar trick. The nearest drone woke fast, smarter than its friend. It smelled the little charge in the coins and adjusted on the fly, pivoting to Remy's hands. He shoved both in the air, empty palms open. "See, nothing," he said, buying breath. The second pickup didn't wait. A woman leaned over the cab and shouldered a net gun. "Sorry, sweetheart," she said, and fired at Cleo. "Mine," Rogue said, and grabbed Diego's wrist. She didn't ask. She took a breath and took just a mouthful of his otherness, that fine tremble that made screws sing and trays slide. It came with a flood of memory, orange church fans, his mama's yellow blouse, the nickel taste of fear. She nearly choked on it. She aimed it thin as a wire and flicked her wrist. The net ballooned away from Cleo as if it had changed its mind and fell into the open bed of the truck like a tired animal. Diego swayed. Rogue let go fast and put her body between him and the world. "Sorry, baby, I know, you'll get all of you back." She believed it like prayer and hoped she wasn't lying. The drone made a decision, tiny and cruel. It dove at Laney, sensor fixed on that flicker of blue in the cup. Remy moved to swat and stopped, remembering Maddie's warning. Instead, he slid the ketchup cup across asphalt with his foot. The drone followed the moving light like a dog, and Remy nudged it under the grill of a semi. "Hungry," he murmured, and put the smallest taste of charge into the semi's bumper. The drone read it as a feast and flew nose first into 3 tons of steel. Its shell made a sad, expensive sound. They piled back into the convertible before any of the fixers got their boots unstuck. Rogue floored it, tires spitting gravel. The kids were quiet in that way that isn't quiet at all. On the interstate shoulder, the radio coughed a NOAA tone. The emergency band spoke in a voice that sounded like weather and would never say the word mutant. "Special marine warning for Magnolia Parish," it droned. "All small craft seek shelter at Bluebird Water Tower. Medical supplies at base." Shelter opens at midnight. Rogue's eyes cut to Remy. You hear that? Everybody with a scanner heard that, he said, which is why it's a bad idea. Somebody paused drones for 5 minutes back there, Rogue said. Somebody's been doing sins for us. She thought of the pause on the camera feed, the way the first drone had stayed in its cradle too long. She thought of the weary woman's face on the TV under the words Department of Damage Control. Could be the same somebody lining up a crosshair, Remy said. Could be both. They passed the silhouette of a water tower in the distance, a round belly on long legs. At its base, she could already see a single car pulled in under a sodium lamp and a red cooler on the grass like a promise. Cleo's Clover sputtered in the back seat, trying to make the tower into a field. It failed, but it tried. High overhead, somewhere beyond clouds, a streak of gold scratched the sky and was gone. Diego's head tilted up, eyes wide. Was that? Keep your head down, Rogue said gently. Stars don't need our attention tonight. Across the parish, in a room full of screens, Deirdre DeWitt rubbed the heel of her hand against her eye and told a dispatch protocol it was misreading a false positive. Bluebird's a drop, she said quietly into a line nobody had taught her to have. 5 minutes. Kids first. Another screen showed a guild chat flagged in New Orleans. Chatter about a boy with red eyes and cards. For a breath she closed her eyes and the world without kids in it was easier. She opened them again and let the harder one back in. Rogue rolled to a stop a quarter-mile short of the tower where the trees made a blind. We go in, she said. We may be walking into a net big enough for a town. Remy slapped a card against the dash, the paper bent with a soft, held breath, purple a twitch under his thumb. My people got ways, he said. We put the kids in a safe room that ain't on a map. We don't wait where the government can count. He didn't say the cost. She heard it anyway. Laney's small fingers found Rogue's sleeve. I'm tired, she said, voice small and so brave it hurt. I want my mama. Forgiveness for the men back at the lot tasted like rust in Rogue's mouth. Compassion for the child weighed more than any haul. Perseverance was a steering wheel under her hands. She watched the bluebird painted sloppy on the tower's belly sway in the night wind, and then looked down the road that ran toward New Orleans and all the old ghosts. Which devil we choose today, cheer? Remy asked. Rogue put the car in gear and let the engine warm like a throat about to sing. The hum in the bones got louder. They took the parish road that bent away from the water tower and the red cooler, and the promise painted on a tank in a hand that could have been kind or cruel. Pines closed around them, and the bugs stitched the dark back together behind their taillights. The hum that had followed them out of the node road under the tires, a bass note Remy pretended he couldn't feel and Rogue refused to name. We go to my people, Remy said finally, thumb tapping the edge of a card like he was counting a prayer. No scanners, no badges, doors that don't show up on city plans. Rogue watched the road while the kids slept and didn't. Your people sold favors for bread before most folks had bread. You sure they still swap for mercy? He smiled sideways without the joke. They got a soft spot for things that grow in places they shouldn't. He glanced back at Cleo, whose palms were rubbed raw from trying to keep a field alive in a car, then at Laney, whose arm was a silver bandage, then at Diego, hollow-eyed and ready to break the world carefully if she asked him to. The fourth kid, Hannah, barely taller than the shotgun in the rack of the tow truck, they crawled past, listened to a thread none of them could hear, and hummed back under her breath like a tuning fork. The yard looked like any other on the edge of the city, a sprawl of skeleton cars with their mouths open, and a floodlight that made everything look accused. A hand-painted sign leaned on a tire, Bayou Breakers and Scrap. Somebody had scratched a fleur-de-lis into the paint and drawn a clover over it in permanent marker. Remy reached out and slid a bent jack through a chain link like a man dealing a card under a table. The gate buzzed and unlocked with an old, pleased sound. Cecil met them inside the bay with a cigarette she wasn't smoking and a ponytail that made her look younger than the lines around her eyes. Mon Dieu, le beau, she said, not quite smiling. You bring the weather with you. Always did, Remy said, stepping into her hug without full contact. Need a room that don't exist, and a promise you can keep. Her gaze flicked over Rogue, white streak wet with sweat at her temple, green shirt under the leather, then to the kids, who made any talk about the price feel like a sin just to speak aloud. Follow me, she said. Garage 4. They rolled the convertible into a narrow bay with a metal floor and a drain that smelled like old rain. The room was too clean for a place that ate cars for a living. It blinked in Rogue's bones the way bad hospitals did. She filed that away because she had more urgent drawers open. Water S in the red cooler, Cecil said. Cash in the lockbox, same as old times. Old times wore a new ring. On the lockbox hinge, delicate as a jeweler's mark, E's in a circle had been laser-etched. Rogue's glove creaked against her fist. High above them, the air thinned and burned. The floodlight stuttered as a heat the yard had no right to know pressed down. The comet that had scratched the sky earlier came back as a woman who had learned long ago how to fall and made it look like flying. She held herself above the gravel by nothing anyone could name, short hair haloed in aurora, eyes bright as a struck match. Photons bled off her in gentler ropes because there were children below. "You're putting a lot of people in danger tonight," she said, voice like a teacher who hated that she had to say it. "Department of Damage Control has jurisdiction. I'm here to escort you." Diego's hand crept into Rogue's jacket and stayed there. Rogue took one slow breath and let the EMT's training settle her pulse. "We got kids with cuts and a car held together with hope and duct tape. You want to escort, Captain. You start with the little ones." Remy's smile didn't quite die, but it stopped trying. "Carol Danvers," he said soft, like naming saints under his breath. He did not throw a card. He didn't even shift his weight in the way that started fights. Then another voice was in his head, not his own and not any he'd stolen. It didn't push. It knocked. "Remy LeBeau." He blinked and his breath misstepped. "Ah," he said, almost to himself, almost to the dash. "That's new." "With your leave," came the thought, mild and precise and gently urgent, like a hand on a shoulder. "Do not trust the room with the clean floor. The second exit is behind the soda machine." Remy cut his eyes toward the dented beverage cooler lined with sun-faded colas on the front of the bay. He didn't answer the inside voice because he'd learned long ago that answering the echoes made you lose arguments with yourself. But he moved, casual as Sunday. "You," he told Hannah, "hum me a note at that corner. Something to make the metal forget it's supposed to behave." Hannah tilted her head and sang a thin line of sound that set the bolts to shivering and the light to a new pulse. Remy slid the machine an inch. Behind it, exactly where the polite stranger had said, was a seam in the wall and a handle that shouldn't be. He almost had it open when a grate slammed down at the bay entrance, teeth biting the concrete. Cecil flinched and then didn't, which told the truth of her before her mouth did. A man with a belly like he'd married too many evenings, and a ring of brass keys stepped in from behind her, DODC blue suits flanking him but with no badges showing. His tie pin was a tidy white circle with E's tucked where you'd miss it if you were trying not to. "Business is business, P-tit," the man said to Remy, apologetic as a bartender cutting you off. "Jean-Luc says he loves you like blood, but blood woulda come with a warning. Essex pays for returned property. You're the line item." "Property," Rogue said, the word ash on her tongue. "Try saying child with your mouth if you can." "We're not here for the children," the man said, and meant it in the careful way of someone who kept the map small so the conscience fit on it. "Stand down, come quiet, everybody goes home breathing." Above them, Carol dropped half a meter, heat rising off her shoulders. She looked at the suits, at the ring pin, back at the kids. Damage control didn't authorize contractors. She touched a finger to the comm in her ear, listened. Her mouth flattened into a line that had the weight of too many wars. "Agent DeWitt says stand down until we sort jurisdiction." Rogue's head tipped microscopically. DeWitt. A name with edges and a weary woman who had hit pause on a camera feed because 5 minutes can change a life. Either ally or ghost. No time to decide. The suits moved anyway. The first threw a ring across the space, a torus of something that looked like glass and wrong thinking, that sprang wide and clapped around Remy's shoulders and ribs. He staggered as his charge went loose like a string cut. The ring hummed with that same Bayou Node note, tuned to the hole in him. In his skull, the voice found him again, firm and kind. "Breathe. Anna Marie will get them clear. Be what you are good at being, a distraction worth a kingdom. My name is Charles. You are not alone." Remy laughed in a way that wasn't joy and put his hands out. "Every show needs a headliner," he said, and let the ring take his weight. Cleo panicked her way into a field bigger than she'd ever built, clover erupting over the concrete in a green tide that made the floor look like spring and hid bad intentions for exactly 3 heartbeats. Diego grabbed a rusted brake drum with his mind and slid it under the grate before it could bite flat. It screamed and stuck crooked. Hannah's hum went up, and the bolts in the fence sang enough to shake a man's aim. Rogue pulled one glove between her teeth and bit. She brushed Cecil's bare wrist with 2 fingers and took the shape of the access map the woman had held in her head, the inventory code gel red, a sticker with a pelican on it, a sugar mill north of the lake that wasn't a mill anymore. It came with a taste of cheap coffee and guilt. Rogue let go before she took more than she had to and before Cecil broke open with it. You had choices, Rogue said quietly to the woman who had opened her gate and sold her out. You still do. Get small, walk away. Cecil's mouth trembled once. She put the cigarette behind her ear and did as she was told. The fireworks happened because they had to. One of the suits panicked and shot a net toward the cluster of small bodies. Carol snapped her hand out and batted it aside with a flare that should have vaporized it and didn't. Some governor she'd strapped to herself to avoid turning human problems into space dust. The flare broke wrong over an engine block and kissed the convertible's hood. Heat rushed back like a hungry dog. Gasoline found a reason it had been waiting for. The car that had carried them out of too many nights and into just enough mornings coughed fire. Remy moved without thinking and threw himself between it and the kids, because if you can't touch the person you love you can at least touch what carried you both. He palmed a card and fed it a whisper to shove the explosion sideways. It worked mostly. The blast bloomed crooked. The green hood he'd painted himself flipped up and over like a wave. It came down into the ring's curve and the ring groaned and held. Metal screamed. Headlights blew. The sound in Rogue's chest changed shapes. None, Remy said, eyes gone bright with pain and stubbornness, and smiled so she wouldn't remember anything else. He flicked a card underhand toward her shoe, edges already singed. Queen of Hearts scrawled with something in pencil, Bluebird 3. The contractors surged. 2 more rings sailed, one clipping Rogue's shoulder and sparking against the leather without finding skin. Carol turned and punched light at the man in the ease pin, calibrated for a shove, not a war. He crashed through a stack of bumpers and decided he had somewhere else to be. The men with him were braver or stupider. They hauled Remy by the ring, sliding him across clover that was already going gray at the edges. DeWitt's voice crackled into Carol's ear like a guilty conscience. Do not engage the transport. You are not cleared to escalate at this location. Miners on scene. Essex has legal cover I'm working to tear. Buy time for the kids. Carol gritted her teeth and took the order because she had once promised to try it this way. She put her body between the children and the exit and let her aura dim to something you could stand under. I can still help if you stop running, she said to Rogue, and hated how it sounded. Don't make me choose. Rogue stared at the ring pinning Remy and at the smoke furrowing out of the convertible's broken grill like breath in winter. She stared at Carol Danvers, who had walked away from worse and still came back when somebody said help. She looked at the kids who had no business knowing any of these words. Forgiveness tasted like rust and sugar. Mercy tasted like leaving. We don't become what they say we are, Rogue told the kids, voice steady in a way that made the world decide to believe her. That's the rule. Eyes on me. She tipped her chin at the drainage slot in the corner, the one she'd seen in Cecil's memory. Clover left. Hummingbird sing. Diego slide. Laney hold my jacket. They went as a small pack under Carol's light and out into the stink of the canal, Rogue last, turning once to look. Remy had found her eyes and made a gesture. 2 taps against his thigh they'd agreed on years ago for Plan C. He mouthed it anyway, because his mouth had always been undisciplined. Go, he said, and meant live. The suits shoved him into a metal van with a pelican sticker that wasn't a pelican. The ring pulsed. His consciousness slipped like a card off the top of a deck. In the blur, the voice that had knocked earlier settled him like a warm hand on the back of his skull. You did well. We will find you. Hold onto the Queen and the smell of rain on old leather. My name is Charles Xavier. Tell Anna Marie when you can that the Bluebird is safer than it looks. Remy tried to answer and couldn't. He smiled anyway, because hope had always been his worst habit. The van door clapped shut. The green convertible hissed and went quiet. Rogue crawled through reeds and ditch water that smelled like earthened electricity, kids shaking and careful and alive behind her. In her pocket, the burnt Queen of Hearts warmed her thigh like a compass. Bluebird 3. She hated what it asked of her, and she went anyway. They slid through the cattails and culverts until the junkyard light was a bruise behind them. The canal smelled like battery acid and old rain. Rogue kept the kids moving in a line, boots sucking in the mud, her leather jacket slicked with ditch water. The Queen of Hearts in her pocket pressed warm as a heartbeat against her thigh where Remy's pencil had scratched Bluebird 3. She wanted to clutch it like a hand and couldn't, because 4 smaller hands needed hers more. Laney leaned into her hip, drained and brave. Diego kept looking over his shoulder like he could wrench time back the way he bent steel, and Hannah hummed a thin note to keep herself from shaking apart. Cleo's palms were raw. They all watched Rogue's mouth like it was going to name the world okay. Breathe with me, Rogue said, counting the EMT's cadence she'd borrowed and kept. In 2 out 4, we stay soft and we stay sharp. The voices she carried tried to rise, the laborer's grunt, a child's cry from the causeway, the gasp of a guard who wasn't a bad man until he decided to be. She picked one voice on purpose, a woman in slate who'd paused to feed and given them 5 more minutes. Deirdre's voice didn't live in her head, it lived in a choice. That mattered. The hum from the node followed them beneath the frog song, tuning fork-stiff in Rogue's bones. It made the hair at the nape of her neck stand, and pointed somewhere north she didn't have a name for yet. Anna Marie. The thought touched like a knock you could refuse. Your consent, came Charles again in that dry, kind tone. I'll only push if you open the door. She didn't have room for fear, so she made room for honesty. You got 5 seconds, she thought, not sure if she was saying it or only shaping it. Bluebird 3 isn't a trap. It's a corridor. A school waits at the end of it. If you let me, I can help you hear the quiet parts of the world that point the way. A pale glow drowned the stars. Carol Danvers dropped out of it like a lantern deciding to be human. She hovered inches above the water, hair haloed, eyes steady in a face that had seen too many orders and tried to make them kinder. She glanced at the children, at Rogue's gloved hand, at the ditch. Stand down, she said, and it landed soft and impossible. Come with me. I'll make sure they aren't taken back to Node custody. Like Remy? Rogue asked, and the name dragged over gravel coming out. Her lime lipstick had smeared in a bright wound across her bottom lip. She tasted sugar and rust. He your business too. Carol's jaw worked. He's in contractor hands with DODC legal cover we're contesting. I can't. She looked away then back. I can keep you from being shot tonight. Let me help the kids. Static cracked over the canal like a small storm. DeWitt's voice rode it in, brittle and tired. Bluebird 3 is open, she said, and Rogue's head came up hard at the name. Road Anna, northeast. You'll feel it. Keep low until the cane ends, then hug the clouds. I'll blind the cameras I can and burn what I can't. A pause. I'm sorry about the car. Forgiveness is expensive, Rogue said without the mic. You sure you can afford it? DeWitt exhaled right into the line. Make me worth betraying. Over the pines, a drone's red eye winked a warning. Another pair flared high, hazard stripes like hornets. Rogue shifted her weight so the kids were in her shadow and looked square at Carol Danvers. I'm askin' polite first, she said. I need what you got for a breath. I'll give it back. Carol's eyes flicked to Laney's bandage, to Diego's thin wrists, to Cleo's hands, to Hannah humming. If you take it all, she said quietly, you leave me useless when they turn on them. Can you hold the line without drowning? Rogue swallowed. The hum in her bones was a wire ready to take charge if she offered it. I'll stop before I break either of us. That's the whole point. Carol nodded once and landed. She didn't take off her glove. They both knew that would be theater that cost blood. She raised her bare palm anyway and offered it like a weapon flipped handle first. Higher, she said, like a promise she'd made to herself a long time ago. Further, faster, but careful. Rogue tugged one glove with her teeth and took Carol's hand. Light hit her like winter starlight, like the cold in space that knows your bones, like the burn of jet fuel, like a girl laughing across a kitchen table in 1995. Her mouth filled with copper and ozone. The ditch fell away and she was shoulder to shoulder with a pilot over a New Orleans runway, with a scientist whispering about mercy, with a child reaching for a hand across decades. The voices in Rogue's head didn't scream. They harmonized. She clung to the EMT's count and let Carol's steel spine knit along hers. An ethic, not just power. She let go before the ache in Carol's eyes turned to emptiness. The older woman took one step back and caught herself against air, already knitting light around her hands like someone relearning a gait. Bring it back, Carol said, more plea than order. I will, Rogue promised, and meant it like a prayer. Her skin burned with borrowed starfire. She flexed her fingers and a soft field unfolded like a quilt over water. The kids stared as the world lifted them. Hannah's hum slid into the frequency of the glow until the bubble sang and held. We flying? Cleo asked, all washing the panic out of her voice. Only as long as I can hold on, Rogue said, and they rose. They kept low through the cane, shadows sliding, drones faking left and losing them in a heat haze that wasn't there 5 seconds before. At the edge of the fields, Rogue felt it, a lane in the sky where the anxiety of machines went quiet, where the hum in her chest sharpened into an arrow. Charles's voice touched the edge of her awareness but didn't push. She didn't need it. She knew. They climbed into dark that smelled like frost and old satellites. DeWitt's voice ghosted them twice. You're clear over Baton Rouge. And then, Skip the interstate. The traffic cameras got hungry. And then the line died with a final, deliberate click. Somewhere behind them, contractors burned legal cover for warmth, and Captain Marvel stood very still under a streetlight and let herself trust a stranger. The bubble held. The children slept in pockets, Laney with her cheek against Rogue's jacket, Diego with his hand splayed to feel a field he couldn't see. Rogue's hair whipped wild around the white streak that had always refused to behave. The smear of lime on her mouth kept catching her teeth and bringing her back to this body, this moment. She counted breaths. When the energy wanted to run hot, she widened the bubble instead of hardening it. Compassion as a technique. Forgiveness as a practice. Perseverance as a muscle. You have to tear a little to make stronger. Dawn limned the world thin and silver. The river turned to ribbon under them, and then to veins of highways. A stand of old trees took shape like a frame for a painting no one had hung yet. Stone walls rose low and unapologetic out of green. An iron gate waited that didn't say anything about Xavier or schools, but its cross-bracing made a tidy X for anyone looking at the world with the right kind of tilted head. The field softened to nothing as they touched down in a gravel drive that had been swept recently by someone who cared about order. Rogue's knees went liquid. The borrowed light rushed to leave. She caught the tail of it and flicked it gently back along the thread to where it belonged. In a junkyard 3 states behind, Carol breathed deeper, rolled her shoulders, and smiled despite herself. "Thank you," she said to no one and someone both. A man in a chair met them where shade broke clean from sun. He had a scholar's face, an exhausted kindness around the eyes that matched the voice in her head, and the sort of stillness that made children quit fidgeting without knowing why. "Welcome," he said, and if that word had ever been named lightly here, it wasn't now. "You did a very hard thing with restraint. You're safe." He glanced toward the house. "Oraro, Med Bay. Hank, intravenous lines in Bay 2. We have small patients." Laney stared at him like he was a movie she'd been told didn't exist. "Is this a school?" she whispered. "It's a promise," he said. "We make good on those here when we can." He turned back to Rogue. "We will get Remy back." He let her see enough of his mind, maps, files, a sugar mill with a pelican sticker that wasn't gel-red stamped on a door, that she knew he wasn't offering hope without teeth. Rogue folded down to a crouch to be eye-to-eye with the kids. "You got doctors and breakfast and people who know what your hands can do without mackin', you smaller for it," she said. "You listen to them like you listen to me and you rest. I got an errand." She stood and met Xavier's gaze. "I ain't leaving him in a ring." A phone buzzed in Oraro's hand before she'd finished tucking a blanket over Laney. She glanced toward Charles, who nodded. She put it on speaker. Deirdre's voice came flat through a scrambled channel, a woman moving fast while burning a path behind her. "Essex is transferring the subject at dawn to the gel-red site. Old sugar mill north of the lake. 2 arc rings and a lock tuned to 57 hertz. Ring battery vents every 23 minutes. If you hit it then, it resets slow. Contractors carry ease pins, you see that, assume they've got jurisdiction papers. The papers are lies." She swallowed, and Rogue could hear the scrape of a badge on a desktop, the weight of a choice. "I just tendered my resignation to a blank inbox," Deirdre said. "I'll run interference until my access dies. Try not to make me regret this." It would have been so easy to snarl or bless or cry. Rogue leaned against the doorway of a place that didn't have the right to feel like home and let mercy be more than a feeling. "You're late to the right side," she said, not unkind. "But you're here. That counts." "We'll need you alive," Xavier added deftly. "If you can steer any drones off our airspace in the next hour, there are children who will sleep through the morning without waking to strangers at their bedside." "Copy," Deirdre said, steel sewing itself back into her voice. "Bluebird 3 stays dark after this call. I can't guarantee it again." She paused. "Bring him back." "We will," Rogue said. She looked toward a yard where a green car should have been and found only the space its memory took up. She touched the Queen of Hearts and felt the graphite smear on her fingertips. "Hold on, Ace," she whispered to the air. "We common." She straightened, the white in her hair catching the first full cut of morning. "Let's go storm a sugar mill," she said to the man in the chair, to the woman in white at the end of the hall, to the children now carried, to the woman on a line she couldn't trust last week, and to herself most of all. Dawn came sticky and pale over the old sugar mill, a brick hulk with rust-scabbed catwalks and a smokestack that pointed a failing finger at the sky. Cane fields whispered around it like a congregation that had learned to keep its head down. Rogue crouched behind a battered delivery truck with a pelican sticker peeling off its tailgate and traced the raised graphite on the Queen of Hearts in her pocket. "Bluebird 3. Hold on, Ace." "Untested team, thin intel," Hank said over the whisper of calms, mangling calm into steadiness. Which is when luck masquerades as competence. He adjusted his glasses somewhere in a van that smelled like antiseptic and coffee grounds. Storm. If you can lift the humidity 6%, the infrared cameras, sensitivity drops by 20. Aurora's voice was a low tide, already stirring the air, clouds in 5. Gate feed looping in 3, Deirdre said, thin and brittle and busy. My access dies as soon as legal realizes I've stopped forwarding the paper everyone thinks binds you. The ring vents every 23 minutes. Make me worth betraying. Rogue zipped her leather jacket up to her throat, tucked stray wild hair under the collar. The white streak laughed free anyway. Lime smeared at the edge of her mouth where her glove had rubbed. She wanted Remy's grin like a light in her hand. She'd settle for the sound of his breath. They took the side door with the pelican sticker and a keypad shining smug in the weak light. Taunt Mattie's charm, twine and bone and a silver bead, clicked once. The lock rolled open like a man changing his mind. Cool air hit them with the stink of molasses and antiseptic and ozone. Inside, everything hummed. The hum had a number, 57 if you believed Deirdre, and Rogue did now because forgiveness she could shape into a tool, too. But it also had edges that felt like a hiss against skin. Signs on concrete pointed with blunt-painted arrows, refinery, evidence, gel red. The last door had a keypad with hazard stripes and a corporate logo that turned your stomach without explaining why. 2 minutes to vent, Deirdre said, a breath. I can put their eyes on the inspection line for 20 seconds. After that, we're ghosts or we're gone. Rogue took point. Fog gathered under the rafters and spilled a cool blanket down the corridor. Aurora floated it like a curtain. They slid through, bodies pressed to concrete until they were a line of warmth on the wrong side of a glass wall. Beyond it, a ring sat like a trap someone had built from an idea of justice. Remy hung in it at the wrists, shirt torn at the shoulders, skin lit with that sickly shimmer things get when they're made to be less than they are. He was awake, jaw set, eyes black-red and ruined with anger he'd learned to braid into jokes. You took your time, Sherry, he said, voice cracking right down the middle between relief and pain. She pressed a gloved palm to the glass. Traffic, she said. Her mouth smiled without asking permission. You look terrible. Was going for rakish, he said, and the word was a homecoming. Alarms breathed like sleeping beasts. A contractor walked past with an ease pin catching the light. Watchful drones, ESX-19s, hazard-striped like wasps, hung in the corners like dead-eyed saints. Behind the ring, a row of small beds glowed blue where IV ports bled their soft poison. Kids, 3 of them, 2 still. Vent in 5, Deirdre said. Then you'll have 30 seconds before the failsafes wake up and decide to learn you. On my mark, Aurora murmured. Lightning wanted to be a shriek. She held it down at a gentler register, a static lace that whispered over metal and made it itch. Hank knelt by a control panel, blue hands moving with a surgeon's mercy. Gene event lock, red line, he said under his breath, decoding the acronym. They aren't just tagging, they're teaching the body to forget itself. His outrage had a scholar's polish that made it sharper. Not on my watch. Rogue glanced at him. Keep the kids breathing, she said. I'll take the ring. She looked at the girl reflected faintly in the glass, brown hair wild with a white strike of streak green shirt, leather brown jacket, boots that had carried her through too many river towns, and she knew what she had made herself survive. Compassion was not softness. It was choosing a way to break things that left room for somebody to heal. Vent, Deirdre hissed. Now. Rogue ripped one glove with her teeth and slapped palm to metal where the ring seam shivered open. Pain ran up her arm like electricity getting promoted. The hum tried to climb her bones. She caught it by the throat and breathed the EMT's cadence. In 2, out 4. Her skin crawled with stark-cold memory and she dropped her jaw and made room. Not all of Carol, she had promised, but enough of the discipline, enough of the spine. The field thinned under her hand. Remy's eyes flared. Hey, he said to make the word easy. Hey, it's me. I know your voice, she said, and didn't let go. Aurora's wind kissed the seam and the hum stuttered. Hank cut 2 cables and bridged 3 with a paperclip because genius still loved a good cheat. The ring gave with a sob and then buckled. Remy fell forward, feet under him like he remembered how just in time. Rogue caught him and held for one breath, too, then pushed him upright and shoved her glove back on. Drones woke like a choir changing keys. 2 dropped nets that fizzed blue. Aurora snapped her wrist and the nets went sideways, plastering themselves to a wall with a lovely indifference. Hank slammed a relay and cell doors popped like a round of applause. 3 children blinked into the fog, one with bandaged hands, one with an auger of fear in his eyes that his telekinesis couldn't lift, one whose hum synced to the hum in the floor until both canceled and went quiet. "Come here, sweethearts," Rogue said, softer than the alarms would allow, and they came because that voice had always brought people to safety, even when safety looked like a ditch. Gunfire went from planned to impatient. Contractors spilled into the corridor with papers in their pockets that said they were the good guys. Deirdre's voice cut over the speakers in the facility like someone had left the weather on. "Attention all units. This is Agent Deirdre DeWitt of the Department of Damage Control. Stand down. You are operating under fraudulent jurisdiction. Facility records are being transmitted to federal oversight in public channels now." A beat. "This is not a lawful order. It is a moral one." Every screen in the hall populated with feeds Hank had spliced and Deirdre had loosened. Kids in blue light, ring schematics, ease pins, the gel-red logo looking suddenly cheap under daylight. Somewhere outside this place, a morning show anchor cut from traffic to something that burned. A star fell through the roof with restraint. Carol Danvers landed in a wash of light, eyes of firm sorrow. She looked from the ring to Rogue's covered hand to the children clustered against Hank's leg. "You tear it down, you own the fallout," she said, but there was no accusation in it, only worry. Rogue tipped her chin. "We came to take our people back." Carol's gaze met hers like a handshake in court. "Then I'll keep the ceiling up while you do." She stepped under the groaning metal and lifted it with a glow that remembered cold space. A drone spun toward her. She flicked a wrist and it decided to sleep elsewhere. Remy wobbled, shook his hands out, and a card kissed his fingers as if it had been there the whole time. The queen flashed between 4 and middle like a grin. He flicked it into the rack of the nearest ESX-19. Purple ran across the drone's frame like wine across linen. It coughed and died. "Been waiting to do that," he said, voice gone feral with joy. 20 seconds until things get very bright," Hank warned, staring at a bar climbing over a line marked red line in a way that made it too literal. "The prototype is feeding on its own fail state." "Can you slow it?" Aurora asked, already calling rain inside, blessing the awful machine with a damp hush that stole its appetite. Remy walked sideways and touched the primary cap with a knuckle. "I can sweet-talk it," he said, charging it not to explode exactly but to be lazy about it. The purple light laced the red like a vine calming a fence. "There, we good, go." They moved. Rogue tucked a boy under one arm and kept a girl's small hand wrapped in hers, and stayed between their bodies and every choice that wanted to call itself necessary. Deirdre talked them around a stairwell with a bad camera, and through a door that had lied to her yesterday and chose honesty today. At the exit, a contractor in a slate vest and an ease pin tried to block their way with a clipboard full of rights. Rogue stepped into him until they shared the same air and let him see the kids. "You keep them," she said, quiet as a knife. "You carry them." Then she tipped her head to his pin. "Or you put that down and you get to decide your own name again." His mouth opened. He did not raise the weapon. He unclipped the pin like it weighed a lot and set it on a crate. "Go," he said, and when he looked at Deirdre's face on the whipping screen, he knew who was going to cost him a job and save his skin. Outside, cane fields writhed in the wind Aurora had coaxed. Sirens whined from a distance that wasn't going to stay distant. Above them, Carol held metal in place while cameras drank every angle. "You promised to bring it back," she called, not looking away from the beam she cradled. Rogue raised her gloved hand in acknowledgement. "And I did," she said. She hadn't taken Carol's light this time because she had learned her own. That was the point. They sprinted to the Pelican truck. Children in, Hank in, Aurora last with rain sloughing off her shoulders like she was born under a roof that belonged to no man. Remy slid into the passenger seat, purple shirt burned at one edge, ripped jeans torn worse, boots black with sugar dust. He glanced at Rogue's mouth and grinned. "Road Saints," he said, like he could taste the headline. Rogue turned the key. The engine coughed into life. "We saints who steal back breath," she said. She looked in the rear view at the mill where the screens still showed the truth Deirdre had loosed. She didn't bless it and she didn't curse it. She drove. They didn't stop until the road became a ribbon that chose a tree-lined drive on purpose. The children were handed into safe arms that knew how to hold their fear without making it bigger. Aurora's hand on Rogue's shoulder was a weather pattern settling. Hank's smile was a man who'd fought with facts and won one day. Deirdre's voice arrived one last time, thin as a postcard in the mail. "My badge doesn't open doors anymore," she said. "The files are out. I'm going to be very unemployed. I can live with that." She hesitated. "I can live with me." "Then you come by sometime," Rogue said. Compassion didn't erase what had been done. It made room for what might be done next. We ain't the only ones needing help. In the courtyard, a television someone had left on for sports decided the world mattered more. Anchors stumbled over gel red like it was a word you could put back in your mouth after you'd said it out loud. The mill behind them burped a sigh of metal and steam and then went quiet. Prototype shut down. Public awake. Remy leaned against the truck, fiddling a card between fingers the way some people pray. He bumped his shoulder to Rogue's. You didn't leave me in a ring. I won't, she said, which was a promise big enough to build a life under. The white in her hair flashed when she glanced toward the horizon. The road would still be there when they needed it, and it would be for something other than running. In a room 2 doors down, Laney slept without glowing. Diego dreamed a dream where steel bent itself into flowers for fun. The hum faded to a memory that would not boss them no more. And somewhere out there, Carol Danvers stood under a morning sky, pinched the bridge of her nose, and smiled at a kind of trouble she could endorse. They had not fixed the world. They had found a better way to break the machines that thought they owned it. That was enough for a morning. They woke to the sound of a fountain and kids laughing like they'd forgotten how not to. The school was a long breath after a sprint. Old stone warm with sun. A lawn that knew how to forgive footfalls. Windows open to let the world in on purpose. The news had already done what news does. Looped the footage until even liars had to learn new words. Gelred had become a thing you couldn't unsay. Rogue stood under the shade of a gnarled oak. Leather jacket over her green shirt, zipped all the way to her throat, lime lipstick bright against a morning that wasn't hiding. The white streak in her hair caught the light like someone had drawn a line in her story, and made it mean something else now. Remy sat on the stone steps, purple shirt torn at the shoulder in a way he'd probably leave on purpose, ripped jeans scuffed, boots planted like the earth would move if he asked it kindly. He rotated a playing card, Queen of Hearts, between knuckles, a small galaxy of violet spilling from it and vanishing again. Laney, no IV, no glow, ran across the grass to tackle Aurora's legs. Diego bent a spoon in the cafeteria for laughs and then straightened it again for pride. Cleo coaxed a line of clover up a path and giggled when Hank pretended to slip on green luck. Hannah leaned against the fountain and drummed on the stone. The water found her rhythm and tapped back. Sanctuary, Xavier said softly behind them, hands folded over the top of his chair like prayer. He didn't ask, he suggested. He had a way of making permission feel like a door that had always been part of the wall. You can stay as long as you want. His eyes were kind but not blind, or as short. Rogue rubbed the edge of her glove where she'd stitched it last night with a needle and a steadier hand than she'd ever credit herself. Feels like a place where kids can learn their names, she said. She watched Laney chase a dragonfly that approved of being chased. I never had that. Remy flicked the card, caught it without looking. We ain't much for staying put, Professor, he said, his accent thick as summer. Heads get itchy, fingers too. And some doors only open from the road, Xavier agreed. There are more facilities, more lies with clean signage. Some folks won't come to a school. They trust the shoulders of two strangers they've seen put down weapons and pick up children. His gaze settled on Rogue. You decide how you carry that. She felt the voices she'd learned to make room for, an EMT steady cadence. Carol's discipline like cold starlight filed thin old anger from places with white walls and rubber boots. Line up, not to drown her but to hum along. Compassion was weight and muscle now. We'll bring we can, she said, and we'll bring word of those we can't. Deirdre came up the drive walking like a woman who'd been taught to be brisk and was learning how not to hurry. No vest, no slate suit, jeans, a jacket that had seen rain, her hair cut close now by choice instead of regulation. She held a badge in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. Both looked heavier than paper. I turned this in, she said, lifting the badge like it needed a witness. They said keep it, it's ceremonial. I said I knew what ceremonies were for. She offered the envelope to Rogue. 3 sites, contracts, off-the-shelf equipment adapted in ways that would make the ethics board weep if anyone invited them into the room, and names you'll recognize, Jean-Luc among them. Her mouth pulled into something that wasn't quite apology and wasn't quite justification. He'll read the headlines and set something on fire. You should know where he keeps his matches. Rogue took the envelope. Deirdre's hand didn't shake. You could have stuck with them, Rogue said. I like sleeping, Deirdre said. She looked at the children as if memorizing them was an oath. I don't think forgiveness is a receipt, she added, peculiar and precise. I think it's a map. If you ever need a driver, call this number. I still know a few doors. She pressed a card into Remy's fingers. Don't make me regret you. Share, he said, a grin that understood its own edges. We gon' give you new things to regret. Carol Danvers dropped out of a quiet sky like a promise she hadn't broken. She wore sunglasses she didn't need, hands on hips in a posture that belonged to someone who remembered the weight of planets. I'm not your den mother, she said, which would have been more convincing if she hadn't brought a canvas duffel that looked like aid supplies. But if you stumble into something that glows blue and sings at 57 hertz again, call me before it starts singing in cities. She pushed the duffel toward Hank. Medical, off-world sterile. You can't buy it in pharmacies because it's for species that don't like us much. Rogue met her gaze and kept it. I ain't got a lot of use for capes, she said, but you kept a ceiling from learning gravity the hard way. Carol's mouth twitched. I like trouble that comes with a code. She glanced at Remy's cards, at Rogue's gloved hand, at the convertible-shaped absence in their faces. About your car, she said. We borrowed the shop while you slept. It waited near the side gate, half in shadow, paint so green it pulled the bayou closer just to match itself. The lines were the same, long hood, soft mouth of a grill, a shape that wanted to see far places. The leather seats were old but cleaned. On the rear bumper, a pelican sticker peeled at the corner in a way that said this thing had lived a little. Someone had scavenged the hood ornament off a scrap and bolted it on. Remy's breath hitched. Rogue touched the fender with her knuckles like a blessing. Aurora's smile was cool shade on a hot road. We replaced the fuel line, she said, and the habit of catching fire. Hank patted the trunk. She purrs, and I disabled 3 tracking vectors before breakfast. Taunt Maddie had somehow appeared without anyone hearing her feet on the gravel, leaning against the driver's side like she'd been waiting there since the last time the sugarcane was cut. She handed Rogue a folded scrap of cloth, a map if maps could be made of songs. Places where the air feel wrong, she said. Not all Essex, but cousins. Her eyes crinkled. Bring 'em home or bring 'em light. Both count. They had a small pile of envelopes and a larger list of debts. Remy sat on the hood with his legs splayed careless and set up a transfer on a stolen phone to a credit union he'd once made nervous. Rogue scrawled on a card with a pen that skipped until she bit the plastic and coaxed it right. To Walt, she remembered his jaw, the slow kindness of it, she wrote. You did right. The hospital paid your bill before you asked. Consider this the interest. To Galaxy Wheels, a cashier's check for repairs after they'd brought too much truth through the door. To a truck stop waitress who'd made kids hot chocolate and refused their money, a thick envelope tucked into a mailbox flagged red. Return what we can, Remy said, eyes red-black and honest. We can't balance it all. We ain't the ones who built the scale, Rogue said. We'll set it down anyway. She slipped the last letter into a canvas pouch and tied it with twine. We'll keep to the rules. New one, Remy said. Add it. Rogue considered. Tell the truth even when it's inconvenient, she smiled crookedly. Especially then. Xavier waited by the gate with the kind of patience that doesn't count minutes. There will be rooms here for you, he said, even if you never sleep in them. Rogue touched the Queen of Hearts through her jacket like a talisman. Bluebird 3, she said, trying the name out loud. We'll use it when we need the sky. Deirdre slid her hands into her pockets. The world's going to argue about you, she said. They'll try to staple your names to their narratives. Don't let them. Write your own. Rogue tipped 2 fingers off her brow. That's the plan. She climbed into the driver's seat. The wheel fit her palms like an old idea restored. Remy dropped into the passenger side, a card flicking into the air and landing exactly where he wanted it because the universe liked a bit of showmanship when the stakes were kindness. He looked at her mouth. Lipstick suits you, he said. Course it does, she said, grinning. Green as for go. They rolled out under a live oak archway and into a day that did not intend to make it easy. The gate swung shut behind them without slamming, and the fountain kept laughing on the other side. The bayou waited down the road, dark water slick as secrets, heron standing priest, still in the shallows. A NOAA station burped a weather alert that said nothing at all unless you knew how to listen for the extra syllables. Corridor safe, midnight window. A trucker on the shoulder flashed his lights twice in a language older than apps. Somewhere in a trailer, a woman tore an ease pin off a lapel and dropped it in a dish with keys she didn't like anymore. They crossed the same stretch of causeway where smoke had once held down the sky and slowed where a new guardrail gleamed. Walt's name was stamped on a small plaque at the base. Remy reached over without asking and squeezed Rogue's gloved hand. She didn't flinch. She squeezed back. Where to? He asked, because the question is part of the ritual and always has been. Rogue looked at the map Maddie had given them and then at the road and then at the horizon, which didn't mind being stared at. She raised an eyebrow. Let's go find a door they think don't open and make it. Remy laughed. Road Saints, he said, affection making the words less like headline and more like home. Saints steal back breath, she said. Heroes return what they can. She downshifted around a curve, the motor's purr turning into a promise. And lovers keep their word. The green convertible took the sunlight like it had missed it and pushed it back onto the trees. Behind them, sanctuary. Ahead, places to name. The road unrolled like a ribbon, and for once, it wasn't just for running.